On today's episode, our panel takes a deeper dive into XRP. Thanks everybody for joining. Hope you enjoy the show. If you were to explain XRP to normies, what would be an easy way to explain it to somebody?
Do you want me to explain to people who are kind of interested in crypto already, or who are not?
Yeah, interested in crypto. To everybody here.
XRP is subject to a lot of misinformation, right? And this comes back right from the very start that they were paid threads on Bitcoin Talk to post FUD about XRP and about Ripple, right? So the first thing to understand is that a lot of the information out there is deliberately misleading, right? And the second thing to understand is that XRP and the XRP ledger is distinct from Ripple, the company, and what they do, right? They're related, but they are distinct entities. So XRP was created, the XRP ledger was created back in 2011, 2012 by 3 Bitcoin developers, right? Now, they wanted something that was like Bitcoin, but didn't have the mining, which is very apt considering we're talking about Ethereum moving from mining to proof of stake to get away from the downsides of mining, the energy usage and that side of things. So they created a new consensus algorithm that's described in the white paper you talk about, the proof of consensus, that does not use proof of stake. Proof of stake hadn't been invented. The XRP ledger was actually around before Ethereum. So Vitalik Buterin was actually an intern at Ripple, or tried to intern at Ripple. The US government wouldn't grant him a work visa, so he couldn't stay there. So he left, and then a few years later created Ethereum. And some of the inspiration of Ethereum came from his time working with the people at Ripple and working, with the XRP ledger. But the XRP ledger's consensus mechanism is not proof of work, it's not proof of stake, but it is extremely fast. And it works on a deceptively simple concept that the only thing that matters with regards, the big thing that we're trying to solve, go back to first principles here. The big thing you're trying to solve in a decentralized blockchain is what's called the double spend problem, right? You need to be able to assure that if I send Jess $20, 20 XRP, 20 Bitcoin, whatever it might be, if I send that to Jess, I can't resend that same $20 to Tammy. I can't spend that twice. I can't double spend. Now, the way that, say, a centralized network like your bank or Visa do that is they have a central computer that has a database with all your transactions on. And when I send that $20 to Jess, it's deducted from my balance. And when I try and send $20 to Tammy, it might say, no, you've spent that $20. You've got $0 left in your account. You can't spend that twice. Or if I do have it, it deducts it again, and $40 is deducted correctly from my account. Now, the big problem is, how do you solve that in a decentralized manner? Now, Bitcoin was the first mechanism, and the idea of the Bitcoin blockchain and proof of work was the first mechanism to try and solve that problem. The people behind the XRP ledger sat down and said, okay, Bitcoin's great. That's a good way of doing it. But we foresee that there's going to be problems with energy usage as it grows. And also, it's not particularly fast. It's not particularly scalable. There's some other problems as well with regards to you can't run a limit order but decentralized exchange on Bitcoin, because the order in which transactions occur is up to the miner that mines the block, and they can choose to order transactions that favors themselves. So you can't run a DEX on something like Bitcoin, right? So they created a new consensus mechanism that's used by the XRP ledger that is deceptively simple. And what it is in order to solve this double spend problem, if you can agree the order in which transactions happen, if everybody can agree that the transactions happened in a certain order, the double spend problem goes away. Because we can all agree that I first sent the money to Jess and I then tried to send money to Tammy. And if I don't have enough funds in my account, that transaction is invalid. And as long as we all agree on that in the same order, then it's okay. The problem being is, on a decentralized network, there's a server in New York, there's a server in Sydney, a distance apart from each other. How do you ensure that the transactions are propagated and that everybody has the same order on there? So with Bitcoin and proof of work, you effectively have a lottery system, and you decide that one person gets to choose the order of transactions and everybody believes that order. And proof of work is the way in which, I'm simplifying greatly, but proof of work is the way in which you pick that one person that everybody believes that order is the order that we go by. With the XRP ledger, instead it is voted on by a consensus by a group of nodes that your node believes will not collude. And that is a system called a UNL, a unique node list. And so your node has a subset of all of the nodes on the network as its UNL. And the idea being that because the only thing that you are asking that effectively that like jury to come up with is the order of transactions, it doesn't matter what the order is. This is the key point. It doesn't matter what the order is because there's no benefit to it being in any particular order to honest participants. The only people that care about the order are people that are possibly being dishonest by trying to do a double spend. And all the honest participants care about is that we all agree on the order. And so it's a deceptively simple algorithm in that what they do is the nodes all on your UNL that you've decided all basically consult with each other and say, okay, we're going to agree on the order. And this happens within about 3 seconds. And they come back with the order and everybody just goes, okay, that's the order we'll go with. Because there's nothing to gain or lose from choosing any particular order. And that's the key point. And the reason being is that XRP is not distributed as part of the consensus process. With Bitcoin, because of the amount of power that's needed, you need to have an incentivization process. And so they piggyback on top of that, the distribution of Bitcoin on top of the consensus process, right? Which is great at the start, is not so great as you get towards the end of Bitcoin's sort of lifetime, because you're basically dragging that whole process along with you the whole way. Whereas with the XRP ledger, the Genesis wallet was open and anybody could just freely take from it, right? So it's a much fairer system than what was available with Bitcoin, because you don't have to have a certain amount of equipment in order to mine or whatever. It's just freely available for anybody to take. So that's the difference. Hopefully that's it in a nutshell. The benefit of it being the transactions take about 3 seconds. The transaction finality is near instant. So with Bitcoin, a block takes on average 10 minutes, but you then need to wait a certain number of blocks to kind of, because it's got what's called probabilistic finality, you've got to wait a certain number of blocks to be sure that your transaction is not going to be overwritten by another block that's being mined elsewhere on the network. So that's why when you deposit with Bitcoin, typically it takes, say, half an hour or an hour if they're waiting for 6 blocks to go by, 6 confirmations to go by. Whereas with the XRP ledger, it takes 3 seconds. Finality is near instant. And if you deposit to an exchange, your money's there in 3 seconds. And so that's why it's ideal for payment networks. And then on top of that, like I said, the XRP ledger has a decentralized exchange. It was the first blockchain to allow tokenization of other assets and the first blockchain to have a decentralized exchange on it. So there is Bitcoin transacted on the XRP ledger. There is Ethereum transacted on the XRP ledger. There's US dollars, there's yen, there's euros, there's gold, there's silver, that are all transacted on the XRP ledger because there's a built-in exchange, which means you can, swap between them. So hopefully that's a little bit of a monologue there, but hopefully kind of a quick rundown of that. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, it looks. Thank you, Matt. Very well explained. And I know it looks like James has a question.
Hey, Jess. Thanks for hosting the space. Hey, Matt, I had a question about the tokenomics of Ripple. So you mentioned it's not proof of work, proof of stake. So would it be right to classify it as a pre-mine?
People use the term pre-mine, although there's no mining, but most people understand what's meant by that the coins were all generated at the start. So there's 100 billion XRP in total, and they were all basically created when the founders of the ledger originally created it. So when they instantiated what we now know as the blockchain of the XRP ledger, 100 billion XRP was created at the start of that process, and it was put in a wallet that was open for anybody to take from. So anybody who was around at the start could take XRP from there. Then what the founders did is they took about 80 billion, so about 80%, to give to a company called Ripple that a few of them then went on to found. So the XRP ledger existed before Ripple, the company, did. And they then gave that to Ripple with a view that, Ripple might use that in commercial products. And Ripple were working on like peer-to-peer. They had a system that basically is very similar to like Strike at the moment. Back in 2006, I think it was. Not 2006, 2016. They had a system that was very similar to Strike, but they were actually fined by FinCEN in the US for operating a virtual currency without a license. So one of the regulators in the US deemed that XRP was a currency and that Ripple were acting as a money service bureau and needed an MSB license. They got slapped on the wrist and told that they could no longer operate directly with the public. So that's why Ripple basically closed down their wallet that they had called Ripple Trade and pivoted to working directly with financial institutions and with like remittance companies. So Ripple's main play at the moment, again, Ripple's separate to the XRP ledger. Ripple's just one company using XRP. But Ripple's main play at the moment is working with remittance companies so that they can move money from A to B without needing banks, right? I mean, the whole point of XRP, the whole point of crypto is that you don't need banks. So that's what Ripple's kind of play is, that you can transact without needing banks, and means that remittance companies don't need to use a correspondent banking system to settle payments. So hopefully
I remember there was something to do with MoneyGram.
Yeah, so Ripple, at one point, Ripple bought a stake in MoneyGram, and MoneyGram were using XRP. Well, they started testing XRP, and they were using it for moving payments backwards and forwards. So Ripple have a product called ODL. ODL stands for on-demand liquidity. It was originally called Xrp. You might have heard it referred to that in the past. And the point about ODL is it is an automated process that allows you to move currencies from A to B, like fiat currencies. And what happens is, again, it's very similar to what's come later with Strike, that if I want to send, say, euros from Europe and I want to get Thai baht in Thailand, that the euros get sold to XRP, the XRP gets transferred from an exchange in Europe to an exchange in Thailand, the XRP gets sold for Thai baht and then distributed to the end user. And that all happens automatically. And that's what, the process is called ODL, on-demand liquidity. And that's a Ripple product that is built on top of the XRP ledger in the same way that Strike is a product by Jack Mallers written on top of Bitcoin and the Lightning Network.
So I only thought Ripple Labs controlled 60 billion. So you're saying it was actually 80?
They were given 80 to start with. They gave a lot of it away and they've sold a lot of it. And they're down to something like about 55, 60 billion now. Yeah.
Do you think that was the fair distribution?
How would you, think about going back in time. We're back to 2011, 2012 here. Bitcoin was around. Think about Silk Road was going on. How would you define a fair distribution? Like I said, it was in an open wallet that anybody could take from. You could say that that's the fairest distribution there could possibly be. The people,
I guess, the public only getting 20% seems
the public could take. Well, the public could have taken whatever they wanted. Like I said, it was an open wallet anybody could take from. So I guess the question being is a system that people could take from in the early days, but that didn't reserve the ability for people to pay for, like you can with Bitcoin. You can effectively, get some now. Is that fair or not so fair? I would argue that having an open wallet that anybody could take from is fairer than a mining system, for example, because you don't need hardware to take advantage of it. Another way of looking at it is anybody who comes into crypto, say now, 90% of Bitcoin's been mined. So for anybody coming into the space now, from their perspective, 90% of Bitcoin is pre-mined. So what difference does it make, right? In pragmatic terms, who owns it and how they got it?
Cheers, Matt. Thank you so much. Because, like you said, it's quite difficult to get reliable information on Ripple based on what's out there. But to hear it directly from you, it clarifies quite a few things that I had in my mind. So cheers for that.
Yeah, thanks.
Great explanation. And just knowing the history, like imagine if Vitalik would have gotten his visa and would have ended up working for XRP, just knowing the history of the space, me being, only in a couple of years, it's crazy. Like things could have been so different if
exactly.
by just little situations.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That could have been a whole, the cryptocurrency world could look entirely different. So Vitalik was, I can't remember how old he was at the time, and he was traveling around the world, and he wanted a job in crypto, and Ripple were kind of the company in crypto at the time. Again, look back in time, the XRP ledger was the second cryptocurrency. There was only two in existence, Bitcoin and the XRP ledger. Litecoin was roughly about the similar time as the XRP ledger, was basically a clone of Bitcoin at the time. So the XRP ledger was really it was the second blockchain and the only other thing in existence. And Vitalik went and stayed at the then CTO of Ripple, a guy called Stefan Thomas's house, and basically sofa surfed. And they spent a lot of time talking about this concept of smart contracts. And Ripple decided to not put smart contracts on the XRP ledger, or not develop smart contracts on chain on the XRP ledger. They thought it would be better to develop them off chain. So they were working on a project called Codius. There were smart contracts off chain. And the reason they did that was they realized that it's going to be a multi-chain world, right? Ripple started a project called Interledger, which was a system to allow interchange of cryptocurrencies between different blockchains, right? And Interledger then went on to be part of a W3 standard, and there's now the Interledger Foundation, and spun off from that as well. There was Stefan Thomas went on to form a company called Coil, and Coil are involved in web monetization and micropayments. So the idea that when you hit some newspaper website, instead of a paywall and getting out your credit card to pay a monthly fee, your browser is automatically paying that content creator. But they realized that it needed to be blockchain agnostic. So Codius was an attempt to do that. It was smart contracts off chain because they didn't want to tie it to one particular chain. Vitalik wanted smart contracts on chain, and so came up with the idea of Ethereum and built smart contracts on chain. But yeah, as you say, if that work permit had been granted by the US government to this random Russian teenager that turned up, then things would probably look very, very different in the crypto universe today.
I have a question about the nodes. How many nodes are there, and can anybody run a node?
So there's about 700 nodes last I checked. It was between like 700 and 1,000 nodes. And yes, anybody can run a node. It's a decentralized permissionless network. Anybody can run a node on the XRP ledger.
Matt, I had a question. When Ripple first came out, they had a concept like it was supposed to be like money's money, right? Like, and I think that's where Ethereum got their idea that they want to have tokens on top of their blockchain. Whatever happened to that idea? That was one of the most fundamental things about Ripple, that it was supposed to be money's money. That was the advertisement that they had.
Okay, I'm not quite sure what you mean by money's money, but I mean, I think if you mean it's a universal way of paying, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, it was supposed to be like a universal way of paying. You could issue your own tokens on top of it.
So that's all there. You can issue your own tokens on the XRP ledger, right? Anybody can. You don't need to have ERC20 contract. It's built in. It's got native functionality. It was the first blockchain that allowed you to do tokenization. And there's US dollars, there's euros, there's Japanese yen. Anybody can issue currencies on the XRP ledger. And because of the built-in DEX on the XRP ledger, you can make multi-currency payments. So I can say, I want to pay, whoever $10, and I'm going to fund that with Bitcoin. And the XRP ledger will then look on the DEX and go, okay, what orders are there sat on the order books that are going to allow me to exchange this Bitcoin for US dollars to deliver it to the end user? And again, this all happens automatically within 3 seconds. And it might not even go direct. It's got a system called pathfinding. And it might go, well, actually, the most liquid route is actually to take my Bitcoin, sell my Bitcoin for shoes, sell my shoes for strawberries, and sell my strawberries for US dollars and deliver that, because you can tokenize anything on the XRP ledger. So the big problem being is technically worked perfectly. The big problem came with legislation. And like I said, Ripple got slapped early on in 2015, I think it was, by FinCEN, who the US regulator at the time, that says you're operating a virtual currency, which is all the more ironic that at the moment they're in a lawsuit with another regulator in the US, the SEC, that is saying that XRP is a security. This is one of the big problems with regulation and the lack of regulatory certainty, that you've got two different regulators in the US, both asserting, different things that ironically could actually both potentially be true by both of their standards. But, you have this really weird, conflict and ambiguity going on as a result of that, right? So, but it's all still there. It's all still there. Now, and again, the big problem being is that the original thought was that each bank would say issue their own token, and similarly to say you've got USDT and you've got USDC and you've got BUSD, you've got different issuers on, say, the Ethereum network that are all issuing a US dollar IOU. It's an IOU. If you hold 100 Tether, then what that is an IOU that says this entity Tether owes me $100, right? I should be able to cash in these 100 USDT tokens to get $100 real US dollars back. It's an IOU. And the XRP ledger, again, was the first blockchain to explicitly represent that. Each issuer, you can have multiple issuers. So on the XRP ledger, Bitstamp, the exchange, issue US dollars. GateHub, another exchange, issue US dollars. Tether, issue US dollars on the XRP ledger. So they're all US dollars issued by different people. And the idea was like each bank or financial institution would issue their own currency. The big problem being is that introduces a dependency and effectively a centralization aspect, because you're depending upon that issuer to redeem your currency. If you hold USDT, you are dependent upon Tether being able to redeem those tokens back, or you to be able to sell them off to somebody else who is assuming that Tether's eventually going to be able to redeem them back, or someone's going to be able to redeem them back. Whereas if you stick with, say, XRP or Bitcoin or ETH, then these are tokens that don't have an issuer. XRP doesn't have counterparty risk. It doesn't have an issuer. It's decentralized. So there's no one entity that can determine whether or not XRP is valid or not. It's dependent upon the network as a whole, and it has a free floating value. It's not pegged to a particular currency. So that was kind of, the banks looked at these, what we would now call stable coins. And this is what Ripple were touting to banks back in 2012, 2013, the idea of stable coins. And the banks turned around and said, yeah, we're not going to do that, because we're not going to trust that the other banks that are counterparties are going to be honest and redeem these. So that's why, again, Ripple kind of switched to this, what was called Xrp, that's now called ODL, which uses XRP as the bearer, because that has no counterparty. And that was the reasoning behind that. The funny thing being is like fashion, everything's coming full circle. And now financial institutions are now looking at stable coins going, actually, that might be a good idea. Again, the XRP ledger was kind of the first with this, nearly a decade ago, and we're now going full circle again. So who knows? It might come back into fashion again.
Yeah, fashion always comes back. I know I see David here. I know he's been hyped up about the jorts making a comeback, which are the jean shorts. But yeah, Matt, great explanation. I don't think we could have had a better person break it down how you did. So I really appreciate your time. And yeah, anybody has any other questions or comments?
I just want to say thank you, Matt. I, felt like I had something to contribute to the conversation, but what a phenomenal job. And then you threw in some history and connected a couple of points for me too, as far as, a few things I knew and a couple missing details between the timeline. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Well, thanks very much for let me speak. And thanks to Jess and Tammy for hosting it.
Matt, can I ask one final question?
Yeah.
There was a time, I'm from Korea. There was a time where literally every adult that owned crypto owned XRP. It was the most hyped, most owned token at one point. And obviously now it's declined market cap wise. Do you think the XRP or Ripple it's on a downtrend, or do you see a comeback on the horizon?
So yeah, I mean, it's really weird. We talk about fashion, right? About how different cryptocurrencies are popular in different places. So Korea was massively big on XRP, and you've probably heard reference in the past of what was known as the kimchi premium, which was a term used to describe how tokens in Korea were trading 10-20% above the price elsewhere. And there was a big thing where which was it? Was it CoinMarketCap, I think, suddenly removed the Korean exchanges, and XRP suddenly dropped 20% in value, according to CoinMarketCap, because they removed the Korean weighting of exchanges in the price, and that had a massive drop on the price, just that alone, which then caused knock-on effects and stuff. But in terms of XRP in general, the last 2 years, the amount of things being built on the XRP ledger is phenomenal. There's a lot of people building. There's companies like Ripple that are pushing ahead. You're seeing pretty much every week, if not every month, you're seeing new companies use Ripple's cross-border payment services. They're using XRP. Ripple's total So Ripple have a separate network called RippleNet, right? Again, this is another thing that's slightly confusing. If I could have, if I had a time machine, I'd go back and kick some people in the shins with regards to naming, because it's not, it's totally understandable these things are confusing. There's a network called RippleNet. RippleNet is not the XRP ledger. RippleNet is a totally separate private network run by Ripple between banks. Kind of think of it a little bit like Blockstream's Liquid network. It's a separate network. It's not the XRP ledger, and it's a regulated network because, again, remember, banks were not keen to touch this weird, cryptocurrency stuff because it's decentralized and they have no control over it, which means you can't regulate it. So Ripple had a really cunning move that they created a separate network called RippleNet that was regulated and compliant with all the banking regulations and was a private controlled network for banks to use, but the RippleNet can interface with the XRP ledger and use this system called ODL. Now, the last I saw, about 25% of Ripple's RippleNet traffic is actually using XRP via ODL and the XRP ledger. Now, that's grown up from like 0 to 25% over the last couple of years and is still growing. So the usage of XRP within Ripple is growing. The usage outside of Ripple is growing as well. So you might have seen reference to a standard called XLS20. That's the native NFT standard on the XRP ledger. So again, one of the big differences with the XRP ledger versus other blockchains is a lot of the functionality is built into the blockchain. You don't need smart contracts. So a lot of people look at the XRP ledger and go, well, wait a minute, you don't have smart contracts. What use is that? Well, tokenization is built in. DEXs are built in. Escrow is built in. Time lock contracts are built in. Now soon, NFTs are going to be built in. Now, this XLS20 standard, ironically, is not live on mainnet because it's being voted on by the network. And this is the big funny thing, right? People say, well, the XRP ledger is centralized, Ripple control it. Ripple have been pushing massively hard for this standard to be adopted because they've got this creator fund and they've been going out and partnering with people like Balmain and who is it recently? One of the car companies they've been working with to like develop NFTs. I think it's Lotus Cars. So they've been going out there and pushing and working with all these brands to develop NFTs. But Ripple, you can't deploy these NFTs on the XRP ledger mainnet because it's not been voted in yet, and the votes hang with the community and the validators, not with Ripple, right? Ripple only run 3 of the validators on the network. There's about 150 validators on the network. Ripple, control like 3% of the network. So they have no ability to actually deploy this. And, I used to work at Ripple, right? And it's kind of frustrating when people are saying, well, Ripple control everything. And I'm kind of thinking, well, I wish, because, in that regards, working for Ripple, if Ripple did control it, it would make it a hell of a lot easier to go to market if you control it. But Ripple don't control the XRP ledger. And so things like this standard XLS20 are waiting on the community to build enough support and vote it to go live. But XLS20 gives you NFTs on the XRP ledger. And so there's been a massive push. There's all sorts of projects out there building NFTs on the XRP ledger testnet, waiting for it to go live on production. And I don't know when that's going to be. Nobody does, because it's up to the community to vote on it. But, when that happens, there's going to be a huge migration from the testnet onto production for NFTs. And again, you've got NFTs that take 3 seconds to mint and cost you 1,000th of a cent to mint, rather than, take 10 minutes and it cost you whatever, $5, $10, $20, $50 to mint on Ethereum. So it's much faster. And again, you've got all the built-in functionality on there. So you've got things like the second sale commissions and things like that, kind of all directly built in there, ready to go. So I think it's growing. I think there's, the amount of companies that are building on the XRP ledger at the moment is just phenomenal.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. You deserve that round of applause. Any other questions or comments? Matt, again, thank you for spending, your Friday morning here and schooling us on XRP and breaking it down for us.